Minister, could you outline the progress made to date on securing a suitable location for domestic violence refuge in Monaghan town and the efforts that have been made to identify a suitable location and secure funding for domestic violence refuge in County Cavan, please?
Thanks, Deputy. And I'm aware this matter is one of importance to you and for other members of the House as well that have raised questions about refuge provision in counties Cavan and Monaghan with myself and with predecessors. And I know there's strong interest locally, and I've recently received correspondence from Cavan County Council in this regard. The response to DSGBV is a cross-departmental and multi-agency issue. It's coordinated by the Department of Justice. TUSLA, the Child and Family Agency, provides supports for victims of domestic violence, primarily funded through NGO service providers. In 2021, TUSLA allocated 28 million in core funding for DSGBV, plus 2 million in contingency funding to address COVID challenges. In 2022, the allocation will be 31 million, so a 3 million increase in core funding. And funding in 2022 will support services to address cost pressures and maintain continued services, including core sustainability costs and the ongoing support of initiatives commenced in 2021. And the additional allocation will also fund the beginning of the implementation of the accommodation review. I'm informed by TUSLA that support for victims of DSGBV in counties Cavan and Monaghan is available through the services of Charman, which is based in Monaghan and funded by TUSLA. And Charman also provides outreach services in both counties, and TUSLA funded Charman in 2021 to the value of 214,000. The TUSLA review of the provision of accommodation for victims of domestic violence assesses the current and requisite distribution of safe emergency accommodation and has examined the current level of refuge provision, evidence of demand for service and unmet need, and the analysis of proximity to refuges by local communities. The review has been completed and publication is expected in the next 2 weeks. The Government will be guided by the recommendations of the review, and I expect the implementation process for the review will identify priority areas where there is the greatest need for achieving safe accommodation for victims of DSGBV. And I'm very keen to see the gap in geographic coverage in Cavan Monaghan being addressed, and I hope to see the accommodation review used as the vehicle to progress and address that gap.
Thank you, Minister. I suppose one of the main reasons many women do not leave an abusive relationship is the shortage of available and affordable accommodation that could rehouse a victim of abuse at short notice. And I mean, according to the Council of Europe, it's recommended there should be one refuge place per 100,000 people, which means there should be 446 places in Ireland. Currently, there's 137, which is 10 less than 4 years ago. And I mean, we did sign up to the Istanbul Convention, and why sign up to a convention if we're not going to implement it? Just in relation to my own constituency of Cavan Monaghan, like we know that there's no refuge place there and hasn't been, and I welcome the fact that it's been addressed, and I'm hoping that there will be progress made in the very near future. And I do recognise the work the chairmen do in those two counties. They do tremendous work, and there's only 2 or 3 staff employed in that service, and they do a lot of outreach work. But I mean, according to Safe Ireland, I mean, 808 requests for refuge could not be met last year. And as we know, the nature of an abuser is to isolate the victim from family and support. So if they went to refuge seeking support, it's because they didn't have anywhere else to go. And I shudder to think, where did they get support, or what did they have to do? Did they have to go back to the violent perpetrator? Thank you.
Well, Deputy, there's absolutely no doubt that we don't have enough refuge space in this country, and no one argues that fact. And that's why the accommodation review was undertaken, to outline where the gaps, where the lack of coverage, where the lack of availability of spaces are most acute, where there are communities, where there are families, primarily women, fleeing an abusive situation who have to travel very long distances, and to identify where those areas were. And I've no doubt that review, when it is published, will illustrate what you know and what your colleagues know, that there is a very substantive gap in coverage in Cavan and Monaghan, and that's something that needs to be addressed. As you know, myself, the Taoiseach and Minister McEntee briefed opposition leaders, including your own party leader, last week on this issue, and outlined that there's a substantive change happening. Responsibility for refuge provision is moving from my department, from TUSLA, to the Department of Justice. All responses to DSGBV will be run through the Department of Justice, including the implementation of the accommodation review.
Okay. Thank you, Minister. Yeah, I welcome that it's going to go under one minister. I mean, because what's needed to tackle domestic violence and violence against women is multi-pronged, and we know that. So one minister being able to choreograph all of that together is very welcome. But I mean, it is scary. I mean, we're obviously very recently aware of the death of Ashley Murphy, but every week there's almost a case in the papers about some woman that's been murdered, or there's a case in court, and it's a scourge, and it's a pandemic indeed. I mean, the Gardaí report that they responded to almost 50,000 domestic incidents last year, and that was a 10% increase on the year before. And then that's only the ones that have been reported. So, I think the need for the refuges in Cavan and Monaghan and the other 7 counties that don't have it are something that could be done immediately to support women who need to get out of a dangerous situation in order to save their lives, to stay alive.
Thanks, Deputy. Well, look, the very significant change that has been made in terms of moving responsibility for refuges and other services to the Department of Justice, that's something that advocacy groups, that the NGOs working in the sector have been calling for a long time, and the government have listened to that. We ran this audit. It became clear that was the call from the sector, and we're implementing that now, and I think that's important. Also, even though responsibility is moving out of TUSLA, in the time that I've been Minister, we have significantly increased the investment in TUSLA in the SGBV. So we put in an extra 2.7 million in budget 2021, an extra 3 million in budget 2022. So we have recognised the epidemic, as you describe it, and indeed the programme for government describes that epidemic of violence against women that is taking place. We've put in place significant additional funding for services, both core funding and also COVID contingency funding. But the next step now is the provision of that additional refuge space, and that's what the accommodation review will allow us focus on and bring forward mechanisms to, as you say, swiftly deliver the new refuges.
Thanks, Minister. Our next